Hello, everybody, and welcome to Positive Psych with Rod Loudon. Today's guest is an actor, acting coach, musician, vocalist, an all-around great human being. He's also the author of Acting My Way, which is available on Amazon.com. Please welcome to Positive Psych with Rod Loudon, Mr. Michael Jacques.
Hello, Rod. How are you?
I'm doing good, man. How are you, my friend?
Top of the heap.
So we've gone way back. We've known each other a long time, and as we've talked about, our two molecules colliding. Yes, our two molecules colliding both changed our paths, our lives in ways that we feel right. So, you teach acting. You've done it at the collegiate level. You have your acting class right now. You're a working actor, but you're also an incredible musician. And you can see Michael's band around the Fort Lauderdale area. MAS, M-A-S is his band, where three-piece power band, where Michael's the Jimi Hendrix, the Stevie Ray Vaughan type shredder and singer that will blow your mind, as he did when I first saw him. And I have the honor, I found out recently, that I was your first student ever.
You were?
Wow.
Yes. My first official ever student, yes.
Right. I showed up and you said, I'm not teaching a guitar unless you get a nylon. And then
have an opinion. We'll travel.
So today we're going to cover a lot of things. Michael, first thing I want to cover is, I want to talk a little bit about your acting class, which I had the honor of sitting in one time and kind of presenting to your class. And that was a lot of fun. So tell me about your acting class.
Well, I can give you a broad, or we can go very specific, whatever. And by the way, Rod, that class that you guested in was one of my students' favorite classes.
Oh, man.
Yeah, and guess you were fantastic, man. Absolutely fantastic. And because the entertainment industry you better have thick skin, and you better have a good therapist.
Right.
So,
well, in many ways, what we do is kind of common. I'll get back to my question, but, I'm a guide. I help people find the answers that they seek, is what I think a good therapist does. A bad therapist will give advice and make decisions for people, and then you're not helping the client to figure out their path. And I think as an acting coach and instructor, I think you do the same thing. You help them find whatever's within them that they can bring out, and you're the guy bringing it out.
All the way. Rod, it's such a great question, the first one off.
Yeah.
My class is sort of based on my own methodology. I use tenets from all the different studies. Acting and music, the arts in general are very dogmatic. And very much like a religion, in a sense. You've got this, that, and the other one. This guy, no, that's the one you want to study. No, this is the one. This is the way to heaven, as they would say. No, this is the, So it's very much like that. And I've kind of extracted everything that I do down to its most elemental essence. How can I get you as a musician, as an actor, somewhere really quick where you need to be without removing all of the frosting and all the nonsense that goes on top of it? Just get right to the core. And acting is very much therapeutic. And I do want to say this for your listeners and for your audience, and for you as well, somebody who I admire and respect and who is one of the best in his field. And, and that would be you, Ron. And,
No mistake.
I always teach actors to be honest and get as close to the truth as you possibly can. Last night we were discussing in class, people always say, oh, you're an actor, you must be a good liar. And there could be nothing further from the truth. Like I've always said, and I tell my students, when somebody approaches you like that, and we hear it a lot, you tell them, no, acting is an art form and lying is a mental illness. And that really shuts people down. And it also, you have to tell people, look, in order to be a great actor, you have to be honest. It's not faking. It's finding legitimate sources of stimuli within yourself and then presenting them externally to the audience via the script, or even via, if you're talking music, via the notes. The notes have a vocabulary unto themselves, and you have to understand and be honest. You know, Rod, if I may, there's that movie Crossroads, where
Awesome.
the exactly
Right.
kids would get spot on. There's a pivotal moment in that movie where the protagonist tells the lead character he gets his heart broken
Right.
by a woman, and he runs out after her in the rain, and he comes back, and his blues mentor tells him finally, now go play.
Right.
And
It's a lot of living, a lot of dying, or something like that.
it's lots of towns, lots of women, lots of songs. The only thing I ever wanted anybody to say was he was good. He could really play. Yes, I memorized that because it means
no, that's such a great movie, and
it is.
you know, good to see the Karate Kid do something other than, you know, and Ralph Macchio, he did actually a pretty good job of faking the fingering.
You know, Ry Cooder was the guitar coach.
Right. But and Steve Vai probably gave him a little.
Yeah, I'm sure. But Ry Cooder was the guitar coach. Very interesting. That's why they have to play in the Strat, or excuse me, the Telecaster.
The Teleblaster.
You know, but to get back to that again, Rod, is that last night we were doing an exercise because one of my students asked me, how do I get to particular emotional states and et cetera? And I said, okay, so I brought her up on stage and, you know, in front of the class, and we went through a basic physicality exercise where it was invoking a extreme amount of tension and then an extreme release of that tension. And during that exercise, she started to cry. And I immediately stopped her because I want to make this clear to other acting coaches who may be watching this. If you don't have a PhD behind your name, you cannot push people to points of breaking. You are not qualified like my friend Rod is. They know how to handle it.
I don't have a PhD, but
you get my point, though. You know, many acting coaches think they're Sigmund Freud, and they take people down dark roads.
Right.
And it can turn out real bad. You know, I always tell my students, Rod, stick with birthdays and stick with middle school or elementary school, or stick with dogs and cats that may have passed on. These are things that can trigger emotional states rapidly. But I always tell somebody, if you've gone through some sort of trauma or molestation or physical abuse or violence, don't go there. That's not a place for an acting class. That's a place for a therapist's office.
Right. That's some good advice. You know, I was thinking, and again, one of the things I love about your book is that it's very just kind of a collection of ideas. It's not just like text, you know, on, you know, we're going to now, you know, look at the whatever methodology of Shakespearean acting, you know, but something that you wrote, I want to read it. To suck or not to suck, that is the question. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to bear the slings and arrows of community theater, nay, hit the big time with outrageous fortunes and a bitchin' Porsche, or to take classes against a sea of dogmatic slogging ritual, and by opposing the accepted norms in them, perchance to dream. I love that, man.
Thank you, Rod. You know, I don't know if a lot of people know this, but that is Hamlet.
Right. Yeah.
I just twisted it into
yeah, of course. Yeah.
Hopefully not offensive and entertaining, and yet at the same time.
Right. But that's the one thing that, you know, that's a theme in your book, is that if you don't get caught up in all this like super methodology, dogmatic, slogging, ritual, whatever, you know.
Right.
Yeah. And how did you come to that conclusion? Like that's not where you wanted to be?
Very, very, very good point. When I first moved back from LA and I came down here, I went to a couple classes because I wanted to keep myself fresh. Every single class I walked in down here, and I'm sorry, local acting coaches, but they don't know what they're doing. They have no clue. They've never worked on a set. They've never been on a set. And if they have been on a set, they don't understand the backstory of method acting and improvisation and script analysis. I have studied everything from Shakespeare to Chekhov to Tennessee Williams. I've gone through, you know, Uta Hagen, Stella Adler, Larry Moss, Lee Strasberg, Sanford Meisner, blah, 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 blah. I've studied extreme amounts of books and texts about the Moscow theater, about Shakespearean, about the Globe. So I know what I'm talking about when I talk about something. And I find many of these acting coaches just don't. They figured out a way on how to, let me stop right there. Let me say this as a side note. And again, if any acting coaches out there or artists or instructors get triggered, well, maybe you should look in a mirror. What I want to say is one of the easiest grifts going in the world is exploiting somebody in the arts for their dreams. It is the easiest and most plentiful scam going. And now because of the internet, because of social media, and because of Zoom and Instagram and yada, yada, it's become an absolute banner industry. And I try to teach people all the time, do your research. So that was sort of my approach to my book. I wanted to just cut the crap and get to the point, make it entertaining, and make you feel like you're actually sitting in my class with me, you know?
Yeah, very cool. So one of the things that I know is important to both of us is the concepts of attention and intention. And I wanted to start us off on this conversation by reading some thoughts about that from Deepak Chopra, who says, the conscious change is brought about by the two qualities inherent in consciousness, attention and intention. Attention energizes and intention transforms. Whatever you put your attention on will grow stronger in your life. Whatever you take your attention away from will wither, disintegrate, and disappear. Intention, on the other hand, triggers transformation of energy and information. Intention organizes its own fulfillment. And I think that's cool because you and I are both believers of putting thoughts out into the universe.
Absolutely.
And then having had the experience of those bounce back into us and happening. And this has happened where I'll think of a client I haven't seen in a while and the phone will ring that day or the next day. And I've freaked my wife out about this a few times now because I said, I'm going to have this client, it's going to call me. And at first she's like, Matt, what are you talking about? And then it's happened so many times. And I know you've had that similar experience.
All the time, constantly. You know, it's interesting, Rod. I have been my entire life. I mean, even as a child, I remember my mother used to say, when I was like 5, she said he would say things that would just blow my mind. And she would say, how does a 5-year-old even know this? So I've always had a very inquisitive perspective on life, Rod. And I've always, you know, if I see something, my immediate response is to accept it, but then I have to question it. And I have to say, okay, I need to find the mechanism of it because I just don't accept things on face value. I don't. You know, hypothetically, I'm walking down the street, I see a UFO. Immediately, I'm going to acknowledge, okay, there's something there that I'm not familiar with. But what exactly is it? Now, I could go for the standard boilerplate that everybody goes for, or I could do my own research and realize either it is exactly what it appears to be, or it's some amalgamation of all points in between. And I find that, you know, and you and I had this discussion the other day with manifestation. I think it's great. I adhere to it, but I also feel in some respects, Rod, respectfully, it's a slippery slope because I think that people say, oh, if I put it up on a vision board or if I meditate on it every day, it's going to come to me. No, it's not. You got to put in the groundwork.
Right.
You know?
Or it might not come in the form that you exactly will recognize or on the time that you've allotted. You know, it may be that goes back 20 years down the road and it's like, oh, here it is, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. You know, it's interesting, Rod, if you trace anybody's path to success, there's a lot of random events that happen that have to line up, you know, that like, right. And in a sense, in retrospect, history makes complete sense. So if everything makes sense in retrospect, I would, by virtue of reciprocity, it has to make sense in the forward motion as well. You know, may I open up Pandora's box here? I have often felt again, it depends on the day you ask me, because my thoughts are like, birds, and they fly around at times, and I just see whatever bird lands on the windshield or the window sill, not the windshield. That would be bad. It's followed usually by a mess, but whatever thought presents itself to me that in that moment is usually what I have a tendency to gravitate toward. And I've often contemplated, is manifestation just, is it echoing on your end? No?
No.
Okay. Okay. It is here, but hopefully it'll fix itself. There it is, fixed. Manifestation, in my opinion, it could be the viewing of time space. In other words, events that have already transpired in terms of quantum physics. We just, in this plane, haven't got there yet. So if you go to see a psychic and you sit down with her and she says, "Oh, I see," and fill in the blanks, and then it happens, that person did not create any event. They merely foretold of something that was already going to happen. So maybe manifestation, in a sense, can also straddle that fence, where you manifest something because you're getting a glimpse into it in terms of time space to an event that you haven't arrived at yet. Perhaps.
Yeah, well, that's cool. I mean, yeah, I mean, and I love quantum mechanics, and I love what's going on with quantum entanglement, and the connection, that everything's connected and it doesn't matter the distance. There's an instantaneous reaction of a particle, whether it's next to you or a billion light years away.
100%.
So that connection, that connection is like, okay, and in different dimensional constructs, there's not going to be a dimension of time as we understand it. And if dimensions overlap, how do we know they don't bleed into each other?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Right.
I mean, like we're going off the rails here for your audience. They're like, "Whoa!" But this is where we go.
Yes.
Like, for example, if somebody says, "Oh, I saw a ghost," well, maybe you didn't really see a ghost. Maybe you're just seeing somebody from another dimensional space that happens to cross over into yours for a second. Maybe they see you and go, "What the hell? Whoa, whoa!" Some crazy looking weirdo.
Right. Going back to what you said about, just things can happen in just a second that is alter your pathway, what I call a course correction. And I always work with clients and course corrections can come in two forms: one that you decide to do for yourself, and one that the universe decides that you need. And usually when the universe gives you a course correction that you don't think that you need, it's painful and you resist it and you're like, this sucks, what the hell? Right?
Yes.
But you need to do that. And it's so interesting. So, I'm in Boulder, Colorado. I apply to schools. I'm just thinking, I'm tired of the snow. Where do I want to go to college, graduate school? Okay, Florida. I barely get accepted to Nova University in their PhD program. And a week before I go out there, financial aid tells me they made a mistake and I'm getting 90% less than I thought. So now I'm having to work as a waiter. I mean, I've done that many times, and I'm working at Bennigan's there on, I don't know, was it Oakland or something Avenue or University, something. And next door, there's this club called JW's. And I go over there one night and I walk in and I see this band In the Pink, and there's Michael Jacques up there shredding. And you were like the house band there, and you were dating one of the waitresses. And then she introduced me to you. And then I started taking guitar lessons from you because I was really playing more guitar than studying. And you told me about Musicians Institute in California. And that's when I decided to drop out of my doctorate program to go to Hollywood Rock and Roll Music School.
It's all my fault.
I don't meet you. I probably have my doctorate and I'm probably practicing in Florida.
Rod, our relationship, our friendship is one of the most mind-bending things in my entire life. And for your viewers out there, Rod and I could literally riff on this topic for days. So many events from that one night that Rod walked into the club, and I don't even know, we just started talking, and one thing, boom, boom, boom. Next thing you know, I'm out in California because of this man. He calls me up, we're talking, and he's like, "Hey, what's going on?" I said, "Nothing." He goes, "Hey, I'm Jay. I got a room for rent. I'm like, oh, I guess I'm moving to California. I was literally like that. And I remember Rod used to send me letters. I'm gonna, here we go, Rod. Here we go with old timers.
Remember
Remember when we had letters back in the day and stamps? I think they still have stamps, I think. I'm not sure.
I think yes, you can still do snail mail.
But anyway,
Yeah, we were corresponding back and forth.
and you used to send me these letters, and I would read them and I was like, oh my God, how exciting, what an adventure. And it was just awesome, man. It was like, yeah, this is, so I was, yeah. And I always wanted to move to California. The only regrets I have about Los Angeles, Rod, believe it or not, is I moved there, I feel too late, and I left too late.
Right, because
felt like, yeah,
you had some success. You released an album, Michael Jacques.
I got a couple record deals out there, that production deals.
Right.
I got myself established in the Screen Actors Guild. So things were kind of lining up, but then as LA does, all of a sudden things just flatline.
Yeah, and it's. I remember, you jammed out. A critic, raved about you in the LA Weekly, calling you the next Jimi Hendrix, and you're expecting, here the phone's going to ring, and silence.
And crickets. Like, and the irony of it is, Rod, at least from my perspective right now, today, looking back on that, had that article came out 15 years later, it would have generated some attention. But at that time, as you know, I mean, you and I were in rock and roll bands. I don't even know how I would describe my band, kind of classic rock, metal, country. I don't know what the heck. Yeah, something different, man. It was just weird, man. It was like King Crimson meets the Carpenters. I don't know. But it was just weird. Well, we had something going on, and the record labels didn't remember. They didn't know what to do with us when we got signed. They were like, well, but because Gloria Estefan and Boys to Men and Ricky Martin and all that stuff was hot plate, So at that time in LA, the metal heyday had run its course. It was gone. It was as dead as the woolly mammoth. And of course, gunslingers like me and you, where are you going to go? Nobody really, nobody's really digging it, and nobody's listening for it. But now you have this complete culture of guitar gunslingers everywhere now, and it's timing, man. It's life. It's the way it goes.
Right. Again, but it's just interesting how, again, like you said, us meeting created this huge shift in the course correction, right? And coming out to LA was one of the greatest things I ever did. I always tell people I thought I was coming out here to be a rock star, but I came out here to be a therapist to rock stars and other creative people. And I met my wife, and it was just the greatest decision I ever made, and I'm so thankful that I ran into that night, because who knows what my life would be.
And I'll tell you, Rod, I have really no regrets about my move to LA, even though it was a big struggle for me, as you know. But man, I wouldn't trade it for the world. I had maybe a little bit too much fun.
I remember the day you showed up, man. I was bartending at some meat market in Redondo Beach, and I'm like, "You're coming to bar with me? I need a bar man."
I remember I literally got out of my truck. I had drove across the country. I pull into the driveway, knock on the door at the Beavis household, that old dried out red-brown door, and I knock on the door. Rod opens it up. MJ, hey, what's up, Rod? He's like, what are you doing tonight? And I was like, I don't know. And he's like, you want to work? And I said, sure. And remember, Rod, you were like, well, you're going to come with me, be a bartender. I'm like, I don't know how to bartend. You gave me a book. You go, here you go, start to study it. And then you said, people will just tell you what they want. And if they don't know, I remember you told me this. You said, ask them, they'll tell you, and then top it off, and they'll be happy. Oh, that was so much fun. Moose McGillicuddy's.
No, I think that was called Beach Gardens.
No, you're right. You're absolutely right. Moose McGillicuddy was the place that the first club I ever went to in LA with you was Moose McGillicuddy.
Wow. Yeah, but
I know.
those were fun times at the old
Wasn't
Peach
that
Gardens.
down on the Strand?
God, I don't even remember, man.
I used to play this bar, Rod. I used to play this bar down on the Strand called, I think it was called Rock Bottom. Oh my God, the place was so great. They would throw sawdust on the floor. It was down in Manhattan Beach, and the place would just be packed. People jumping up on stage with you, girls grabbing the guitar. It was just amazing, man. Yeah.
Yes. And that's still happening today as you're shredding the Miami area.
I am
So,
still
yeah.
trying the best I can.
Yeah. Oh, and by the way, for guitarists out there, Michael has a YouTube channel, Michael Jacques, where he puts up videos on music theory, cool blues licks, cool
Songs.
practice techniques, parts of songs, and play. Really cool. And it's not like the opposite of this. My podcast tends to be long. Yours is like 5 minutes, and okay, now go practice.
Well, you know the difference is, see, Rod. I was almost going to say something, and I thought, no, maybe I shouldn't. I don't want to insult my guys. But in the guitar circle, especially online, I think attention spans are very short. So, I literally, guys, I'll make I'll make a video that's 5 minutes, and I'm like, oh, that's too long, and then I'll go and make a segment of it, a 30-second segment short of it to try to lure people to watch the longer one, the 5-minute one. And then I even put annotations in the video in case they they can just click to what I'm talking about. So how easy can you?
I've learned a lot from it. I have been too lazy, and I've chosen to do other things with my time to really get back into music theory, but you're very self-taught, and you got the music theory down, and you
Can I share a story? Can I share a story with you?
Sure.
I'm going to expose myself right now for the masses. Emotionally. I got into college at Florida State University in their classical guitar program. I'm sorry, Florida State. I got in their program. I couldn't even hardly read music. I bullshitted my way through the audition. Absolutely faked it 100%, and they actually thought I knew what I was doing. And then when I got into the program, I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do now? I don't know anything. So I got books, and like I just did, with acting, I just taught myself. Rod, you and I both know books are out there. You want knowledge. Oh my God. You have a phone. It's the world's largest library at your fingertips. You want to know something, just research it,
Exactly.
So I taught myself how to play after I got into music school. I can see, right? Somebody's going to watch us and go, we're going to revoke his credits. Why? Get that wise guy. Get him on the horn.
Right.
Making us look bad.
So that's the part of being a creative, and you were earlier talking about the psychology of acting, the emotionality of acting, the integrity and honesty that you need to bring to it. And you model that. You say what's on your mind. You're not shy about sharing your beliefs and
Ron, I try to be gentle with people as well.
Right.
I'm firm, but I try to be gentle because I don't believe that crushing somebody's spirit is the way to accomplish anything. Many acting classes, they go in with this mind that I'm going to break my students down to build them up, which is it's the anti-process, You don't break people down. You build people up from where they are, and you instill confidence in them so that they feel, if I may, Rod, and I know this is, here we go in terms of redundancy 101, but the entertainment industry is unlike any other job in the planet. Every single day is a journey into imposter syndrome, self-doubt, self-flagellation, if you will, success, failure, failure, failure. You can literally go on. For example, I pointed out to one of my students, Willem Dafoe, the great Willem Dafoe. literally was on a 4-year dry spell early on in his career. He went from doing a couple of really great movies, and then I think he did Heaven's Gate, and then he became Kryptonite to Hollywood for like 4 years. Now, I don't know if you guys can imagine what that would do to your mind. 4 years, nobody wants to touch you. You're Kryptonite, you're a leper. Everybody's like, oh, no, yeah. That's the difference between our industry, whether it's music or acting or writing or directing, and all others. You know, the instability is a guarantee daily. And I mean this, you know, to any actors that are out there, seriously, if you're going to get into the arts, you better have your therapist on speed dial. I am not joking, because you're going to get torn up. Really. And I'm a strong person, and I've had my ass kicked 6 ways from Sunday. So, you know.
Yeah. No, and I know, because I've worked with these people and people that you would consider to be quite successful, and you know, they have the same problems that we all do. You know, it's not like you reach a certain level of success and all your problems go away. In some cases, they're magnified.
Right, right. I know you have a lot of celebrity clients, so you know, I can't imagine at that level what it would be like. Like, you know, I struggle at my level, and I can't imagine being in their level with all of it. You know, you do one thing wrong, you do one bad movie, and you're done. You know, they put you on ice for, I mean, look at Michael Keaton, phenomenally talented actor. I think they put him on ice for like 10 years.
Right.
You know, I mean, he was friggin' Batman, for crying out loud. You
He
know,
was Mr. Mom.
right? He couldn't get hired.
He was 220, 221, whatever it takes.
He was Beetlejuice, for crying out Christmas.
Right.
You know, I mean, this guy, you know, and yet I think they put him on ice for like 10, 12 years.
Right.
Yeah.
It is a crazy, you have to be able to, you know, if you're a person that really needs structure and stability and like a guarantee, the creative arts is not for you, because you can be on fire and then you can be as cold as the lowest level of Dante's hell.
Yeah, you go up and then boom.
Right. And it's, you know, feast or famine, as it is. And that's tough.
It is.
That's tough. And, you know, how many times are you going to hear no before you like hear a yes?
Or Rod, if I may say, how many times you're going to hear no until you start to believe it? That's the slippery slope. That's the danger zone right there. And I try to guide my students always. And as the one thing I'm known for, Rod, my reputation here in my community as a coach and an actor, but especially as a mentor or coach, is that my people know that I got their back 24/7. If you're tripping, if you're feeling beat up, call me. You know, I'm of service in my communities, you know, I mean, and not to sound kumbaya, but you and I, Rod, are very much in alignment on this. I mean, we help people. That's what we do. You know, I wish that more people would be like us, but unfortunately, everybody's trying to collect as much stuff. May I, you know, I was watching this documentary the other night. Really, it really touched me, you know, in a very deep, personal way. It was Billy Connolly, the comedian, actor, musician.
Sure.
And I had met Billy on a few occasions in LA and got to hang out with him. We would go over to this cigar shop on Ventura, not Gus's, but the one up the road. I forgot the name of it, Club Havana or something like that. But it's a really cool place. But I got to meet Billy, and we would hang out. We'd have cigars. And I was just always taken with how just grounded he was and is. So I was watching this documentary, and he's been diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, and he's bravely and brilliantly wrapping up his life. And I loved what he said. He said, you know, we spend the beginning part of our life, and I'm paraphrasing him badly. He's way more articulate than me. And he said, we spend the beginning parts of our life amassing all of this stuff. And then as we cross over that peak, we start to give it back. And he said he feels like it's just a preparation for the next adventure. And I thought, and the brilliance of that is that it's exactly the same thing my mother said before she passed. She's ready for the next adventure. And I thought, wow, what a beautiful way to look at things, you know?
Yeah, you know, no one's getting off the planet alive. So, yeah,
No.
something's going to take us out. You know, you
Yeah, you don't
mentioned
get
smoking a cigar with Billy. Didn't you also like hang out and smoke a cigar or smoke something with Eddie Van Halen one night outside of a guitar
oh
shop or
yeah,
something?
yeah, that's a great story. Okay. Okay, so I was at Gus's hanging out because that was my thing. I would go to work and on my way home I'd pull into Gus's and hang out with the guys. For those of you that I think they closed Gus's about 15 years ago or more. Ironically, I have a dresser sitting right there from Gus's smoke shop that Jimmy, the owner, gave to me. And it's this antique dresser, and it is so old. And he was like, you know, they were getting ready to, and he was like, "You want it?" And I was like, "Yeah," because it was sitting in the back.
Right.
And it was this old dresser, and I have it. It's my TV stand. It's been mine for ever since. I love it.
Oh,
It's
cool.
so oh my God, Rod, I'm so sorry I digressed. I had a point I wanted to make. What was your question
Where
again,
you
my
were
friend?
hanging Van Halen, man.
Yes, thank you. So I'm in Gus's, and oh, I see that PRS peeking up over your shoulder. Very nice. Very nice. You're making me jealous. So um, I was in Gus's smoking. Eddie comes in through the back, and I had parked around back as well. And I parked behind him. So Eddie's in there in his purple Range Rover. He has a purple Porsche, purple Range Rover at that time. And I park in behind him. So he's in the humidor, and I go in to get myself, I think it was a Santa Rosa Maduro. Really nice cigar, man. Back when I used to smoke. Don't do it anymore.
No more
So,
cigars for me
right, no
either.
more fun. Can't have fun with you, Walter. You know, hey, let me tell you something for you young guys out there. When you're in your 20s, eat McDonald's, smoke cigars, have a good time. Because when you get to be an old guy like me, none of that's going to happen anymore. Okay. So I'm in there and I go into the humidor and Eddie's in there and I'm just like, and right out of my mouth, I look at him and I go, you know, and when you're guys, when you meet somebody that you idolize, sometimes you say the stupidest things. Well, I looked at him and I said this. I said, "I know who you are." What the hell was that? What is that even? So he
Right.
turns around and he says, "Oh, hi, my name is Eddie." And I said, "Yes, I know." And we started talking. And I said, "Oh my God, you know, blah, 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 big fan. I'm a guitar player." And he had a tattoo of Wolfgang on his shoulder. And he showed that to me. He goes, "Oh, this is my tattoo." But the thing that struck me about Eddie is that he was so vulnerable and open. And I say this with respect, not as any kind of
Sure.
being snarky or anything, but he just seemed so unbelievably lonely to me. Because I kept thinking, as the day progressed, hanging out with him, I felt like, does he have any friends? You know, which gets back to what we are talking about earlier. I think that superstardom can be really lonely, man.
Right.
So he goes, he buys all this stuff, and he takes out this billfold, and literally it was about a foot long, and it opened up, and it was just loaded with black credit cards.
Right.
And he just took a credit card out and he just gave it to Jimmy, and he was like, "Oh, I want 5 of these and 20 of those," and da da da. And he was just and the thing that blew me away about him, and I really want to share this, and thank you, uh, Rod, for bringing this topic, is that he had no concept of money. He had so much money, he had no concept of money. I can only explain it like that. When you
Right.
see somebody that is on that high up on the mountain and they're purchasing things, there's not even a thought. And then Jimmy said, "Oh, Eddie, you want your receipt?" And it was almost like it caught him. Like, "A receipt? What's that?" Like, "Oh, it's like, yeah, yeah." And he stuck it in the billfold and he went. He left, and I was like, "Oh my God, Eddie Van Halen! Oh my God!" Da, 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 da. And the guys were tripping out. And Eddie comes back in and he says, "Hey, who's got the red Honda?" "Me." He says, "You parked me in, man." I said, "Oh, I'm so sorry." So I go out back. We end up leaning against my piece of garbage 1985 red Honda Civic, I think it was, talking and smoking a cigar in the back. And he was telling me about Diamond Dave, and he was telling me about Gary Sharon. He was telling me about the MTV Awards and backstage, and telling me about Valor. He was telling me everything. And I'm just like freaking out because I'm like, You know, I'm just some schmo. Like, you're Eddie Van Halen. Like, and again, I say this with all due respect. I felt like he's so lonely. Like, I don't know, man. I mean, maybe it's just me. You know, maybe that's why I'm a
Right.
coach. Maybe people just feel very comfortable talking to me about their things, you know, their issues or their life. But whatever the case was, it was an unbelievable moment in my history that I got to hang out with the Eddie Van Halen. And we didn't really talk about, we even talked about his first album. We talked about the 70s and how music goes up and down and just everything, man. You know, guys, you know, when you're talking to somebody, you got this tape recorder in your head giving you a dialogue. And I'm thinking, oh my God, if I had recorded this, I could go to Rolling Stone with the article of the year. Like, he was telling me, he told me about his guitar vault. He told me about, I mean, everything. And I was blown away. And I just kept thinking, I can't believe he's telling me this stuff. I'm just like some schmo from the valley, you know?
And after that, you probably thought, damn, I should have said, hey, let's get together and jam.
Yeah. You know, he was just, but I'll tell you one thing, Rod, he really was really one of the nicest, coolest guys I've met. You know, here's the irony of it is, and Rod, I'm sure you know this as well. A lot of the actors that I have met, some of them have been really, really nice, and some of them have not been. I can't think of the top of my head a musician that I've met that has not been unbelievably awesome. Not one.
Yeah.
And I've met a ton of musical superstars, and they've all been some of the coolest guys you ever know. I mean, the coolest guys I ever met in my life were Poison. CC, Brett, they're like the nicest guys in the world. They really are.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. Well, musicians are all about creativity and creating love and putting it out there and doing it because we love it. If you, and you probably know this, if you're getting into acting because you want to become rich and famous, that's probably not the place to start.
Yeah, no.
You know, you be ready to grind it out, be a working actor, go on auditions, and there's a few people. Yeah, and a few people hit a home run. You get a Big Bang Theory or something like that, where all of a sudden, boom, I hit the lottery in the acting. But for someone like you grind it out. I guess you get you just got a role where they have to age you.
Well, I'm contemplating that. Yeah, they want it. I'm supposed to play a grandfather. You know, granted, maybe my ego is exceeding my age. I don't know.
Right.
But you know, I don't think I really look like a grandfather. I could be somebody's dad, you know, but
uncle.
Yeah, or an uncle, right? That uncle. Hey, dude, what's up?
But if you have to go through makeup and they age you by 20 years, I guess that would be an experience or
if they do. Yeah, I mean, usually though, those age up things they always look really cheesy. But you know, the primary function there, Rod, I got to look at the script. If the script is garbage, I'm not going to do it.
Okay.
You know, I want to say this about acting. Stanislavski is quoted, love the art in yourself, not yourself in the art. And I have an interview process for my classes because, you know, I do online and I do live classes. I do online people that want to study with me that live in other states or even other countries.
Sure.
And yeah, it gives them an opportunity to study with me. And I find that I always do a screening interview. First question I ask them is, tell me what's your feelings about fame? And if they say, oh, I want to be famous and this and that, I almost inevitably say that this is not the class for you. And I always try to explain, Rod, I'm like, listen, I'm not trying to be off-putting. I'm not trying to be a jerk and condescending. But if you're interested in fame, I'm not the coach for you. If you want to be good, if you love art, acting, and music, I'm the coach for you. But if you want to be famous, you know, I often say this about fame, and I mean it. I mean it. And somebody tell me I'm wrong. Fame is like driving down the interstate, sticking your hand out the window and grabbing a winning lottery ticket that just flew out of somebody else's car. That's about your odds getting famous, really.
Right.
You can be a working actor. And I do want to say one other thing too, Rod. One of the fundamental differences I feel between acting and music is that even though music is rife with denial and failure, you can still get acknowledgement for being good. You can go and play at your local club and people will walk up to you and go, hey man, you are unbelievable. Great guitar player, great singer, great bass player, whatever. And you go, thank you. So there's a sort of a banner of achievement in that sense. You know you're good and you got good by practicing. So there is some acknowledgement. Whereas with acting, there's no acknowledgement, none. You might think you're good until that next audition and the casting director unloads on you and destroys you. And next thing you know, you walk out of there feeling an inch high, like a complete and abject failure. I think those are the two dividing things about acting and music. Music, I will say this much. Music, I think, is harder to be successful at. Acting, you better have a rhino skin because you are going to get beat up. Music, I think the thing with music, Rod, and you and I know, Bentley knows, the rest, music it evolves like this. You're doing something and a half an hour later, it's out of fashion. And you're like, well,
Right.
who knows, I mean, well, that's what happened to me with one of my first record deals. We had the deal. By the time the Grammys hit that weekend, the next week we were dropped from the deal, literally. Because they weren't looking for us. They weren't looking for rock bands. They were looking for, at that time, the Latin X Miami sound. And we were anything but,
Right. So in terms of acting, do you also talk to them about like how to get an agent?
Yes.
Because that seems to be probably pretty important to be able to have someone who's going to be out there, how do you go about getting an agent?
Two things I would tell anybody, Rod, in your audience who's interested in this craft. One, find a really good photographer, not your friend, not somebody that does wedding portraits, somebody who does acting headshots, and he or she has a reputation. And they get people booked off their shots. That's your first thing you're going to see. Whether you have an agent or not, your headshots are numero uno. That gets you in the door. Bad headshot, you're floating out there in the ocean forever. To get an agent, got to get a good headshot. Once you get a good headshot, well, you're going to have to grind. And again, you're going to have to get used to having people tell you no and shut the door in your face. You go to, say, for example, Screen Actors Guild, SAG.org. You navigate their very confusing website. Yes, SAG guys, your website is confusing as hell. You find resources. You go to that. Then there's a drop-down list of managers and agents. Then you drop that down. Then you find your location wherever you want to hit. And then you just start cold calling and sending out and going to websites and cold calling and sending in your headshot and your resume. Now, if you don't have anything on your resume and you're a brand spanking newbie, well, as Shakespeare would say, therein lies the rub. Because they're not looking for people without experience, but you're not going to get any experience unless you get an agent. But you don't have any experience, so they're not really interested.
Right.
Give me a call, kid, in 6 months when you get it together. Keep in touch.
Yeah.
Thanks for calling. So you get a headshot. You go on Actors Access, casting networks, even Backstage, or there's one out there in California, Casting Frontier, 800 Casting, I think it's called. There's a million of them. Spotlight in the UK. Sign up for those websites with your really good headshot and you start doing anything, as long as it's not humiliating or dangerous. Because one thing, kids, in this business, the internet is forever. So you do a garbage project, that thing's going to hang on your shoulder like an albatross the rest of your career. People, you might do something of an Academy Award-winning, performance, and all of a sudden you're on a talk show. I'm going to go, remember when you did that studio? And you're like, oh God, and when you played The Hobbit or whatever, and you got the plastic ears, whatever, be careful with
it. And I think I was with you when you got your break. I think you mentioned Bentley Mitchum, fellow actor.
Oh yeah, Bentley, love him.
And you and I think you and myself and him, and I don't know if it was my brother Greg or Madman Martin or somebody. We went
Martin.
down to an audition for a Miller beer commercial where they wanted
Yes.
rockers.
Yes. No,
And you and Bentley got cast in it, and they said, Rod, bye.
Well, you know what happened, Rod, is that I remember Bentley came to the house and he's like, where's Rod? And I don't know if you were there yet. And I was like, I don't know, I was playing my guitar and he's like, well, I got an audition. I need somebody to play guitar. Why don't you come with me too? And I said, yeah, okay. And the rest is history. I go there and I remember I got my green Strat and the producer, director, whatever, he at the boombox at the time. I'm aging myself, guys. This is a boombox. Like I say to my younger people, what's a boombox? Google it. So they got a boombox and they put in a cassette. My God, Rod, maybe we should, I'm doing the rewind. So they put it in a cassette and they're playing this song for the Miller beer commercial. And I never forgot it. And the song was so basic. It was like D, C, and G. And the director was like, can you do, and I'm a shredder. And, so the director's like, can you play this? And I was like, yeah. So I'm playing like the chords right along because I got to hear it for a second. I'm like, yeah, this is, I'm playing along with it. And they're all impressed. Oh my God. And I'm just thinking, again, there's a tape recording going on, going, man, are you kidding me? Like, I could do this at 6, So I booked the job, it was really fun. I think Martin, it was me. Weren't you in that commercial with me?
No, they didn't call me back. They called you and Bentley.
I thought Martin was in it too.
I don't know. I don't recall. I thought it was just you. I don't know. But anyway, that's what opened the door to everything.
It just started the ball rolling. I mean, I did extra work when I was down here in college in the 80s because I took an elective and one of the teachers was friends with this woman named Candy Milford, who at that time was a big casting director down here. And, I was a cocky kid, and I think I was 19, 20, I don't know. And, I was brassy. And the professor of this class that I took as an elective, it was a dance class. And she just loved me. She's like, oh, I want you to meet somebody. So I met Candy, and Candy's like, oh, kid, I like your look. I like your attitude. You want to do extra work? And, me, Rod, right, with everything. Yeah, sure. So, and next thing you know, I'm doing extra work and, so it was.
But that, that's interesting. It goes back to the whole thing. We don't meet. You don't come out to California. You don't go on the Miller Light or beer commercial.
Yeah, no.
And then you're probably not an actor or acting coach today.
Rod, it's so that is one for the ages. Every single girlfriend or relationship I've ever had, they would be non-existent. It's such a butterfly effect that, I've often said in life, and I truly believe this, love to get your take on it, Rod, as a professional. I believe that in life, we travel around and sooner or later we'll come to the proverbial end of the road. And then you have to go, proverbially speaking, left or you go right. And each one of those choices leads you down another path. And each one of those paths has its own outcome. Now, I feel that once you make that choice left or right, you cannot alter the path until it reaches its logical conclusion. At that point, you're going to be faced with another choice, left or right again. And I've often thought about, wouldn't it just be so groovy to be able to just see the alternate universe? Michael's never met Rod never met Michael, and see how it turns out. Man, would that just be right?
Right.
Like, what? I could have probably ended up being a dentist in Omaha for all I know.
Exactly. No, and it is very interesting. I mean, I think about, being in college and having to take one of 3 classes as part of my major in psychology. And I took this class on psychology of perception, and I ended up hating it. And I quickly dropped it and took a class on cognitive research and cognition. And that turned out to be Dr. Healy, who was the chair of that department. And then she gave me an independent study where I'm working in a lab testing students on memory and cognition and everything. And I'm talking to her one day and saying, I don't want to go home to Denver. My parents lived in Denver at the time. I want to stay in Boulder, but I need a job. And she goes, well, my husband's looking for an apprentice. Like, apprentice what? He goes, well, my husband's a French pastry chef, and he's looking for an apprentice. I can make cereal. I can make Eddie. Well, he's looking for somebody who can train that's smart. So I go meet with him, and he hires me. And I end up working in his pastry shop. And Bruce Healy is the name of the gentleman who wrote Mastering the Art of French Pastry. And then that leads me into the whole restaurant job of doing everything you could possibly do in a restaurant. That keeps me in Boulder for like 4 years before I decide, okay, I need to go back to graduate school. And Dr. Healy had offered me a fellowship to go ahead and do a PhD in cognitive therapy and research. I'm like, no, I got to work with people. I can't do research. That's not me. And then there I am one day going, okay, where am I going to go to college? So I don't drop that class. I never meet Dr. Healy. I never then become a private pastry chef, who then becomes a waiter and a bartender and doing all these things. And then I don't end up at Bennigan's as a waiter and then going over to JW's.
So many things. I mean, maybe you don't, you wouldn't have met your wife.
No, I wouldn't have.
Nothing. I mean, it's such a mind blower to think about this, you know? I mean, I always go, wow, you just start thinking. I think it's a beautiful and fun thought, but it can also lead to a slippery slope. The what if, what if, and that's somewhere you got to be careful of as well.
And that's what motivated me to go to music school, because, I was voted most musical in my high school. I played trumpet all through high school, and I always loved music. And I started playing guitar after I graduated college. And I was just sitting there in Florida, coming from Boulder. I was like, I think they looked at me like a rube and like I'm fish out of water in Florida, in the 80s with the shirts and the gold chains. And here I am. And I just wasn't feeling it. And so, I said, what if music is my destiny? I got to answer that. So that's what I said. That's why I said, bye, mom and dad. Sorry, dropping out of doctor's program. And they weren't surprised. They were like, well, we know you're loving music. So there you go. So yeah, answering, especially when you're young. If you have the what if about something that you feel you might be passionate about, go explore it. Do it in your 20s.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's funny, Rod. Last night in one of my classes, we were talking about that, and I quoted one of my other students, and he's an older student. He's like in his 50s, really cool guy. And am I allowed to say his name, or is that too?
Yeah, I don't care.
His name is
Flash.
I'm giving you a shout out here. And like he said, which always stuck with me, he said, you don't know who you are until you go to the edge. And I thought that is so true, and when you're young, like I couldn't agree with you more, Rob. When you're young, that's the time to push the envelope, take the chances, make the move. Right. You want to move to Europe? Go,
Right. Yeah. Don't have the regret of going, what if? Answer the what if.
Oh, yeah. No.
Answer the what if the best you can. Because I knew when I came out to LA that was a long shot, right? And I get the GIT, and I'm like one of the worst students there. I've been playing guitar for like a year and a half, and you had given me some basic stuff. So I was, but just the grind of it. Lex Lang, was roommate, and he did me the greatest favor. He kicked me out of his band like 3 times because I sucked. But the 4th time after doing the whole Mystic Day thing, I was now in the Lex Lang band and playing in gigs in Hollywood.
So. You joined Lex's band after Mystic Day?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Wow. Whatever happened to that flower pot head of Lex? Remember that with Tommy?
I don't know. I'm going to have Lex on. Lex is scheduled to come on. We're just trying to get some scheduling, but I'll have to ask him about that.
Him. I have a photo that somebody took at, I think it's an FM station, and I was playing with that band, the Hippies. And it was me, Goler, and Maddie, and we were doing that Southern blues thing. Yeah. That was cool, band. That was a great band. We were way ahead of the curve. And we used to use Lex's head as a tip jar. Sorry, Lex.
Yeah, I'm trying to even remember. That wasn't his fake head from one of the movies he was
in. Yes, it was the fake head from the movie where he got the head cut off. And we would use that, and Kohler would stick
Oh my
a
gosh.
tip jar thing in the head, and people would put bucks and stuff in Lex's head. Oh God, it was great, man. You know what? You
Well,
can't make this stuff up. This is the
no, there's,
beauty of it.
yeah. And
It's
that's the
fantastic.
beauty. We both pursued it, you know, and I think that's the
Oh,
thing for younger people to say is don't be afraid to fail. There's no real such thing as failure. It's just one step to getting to where you need to be. And you know, one of my favorite sayings is fear is a fucking liar. Don't let fear trap you, right? Don't let fear push you around and keep you from trying. Because usually when you have an opportunity and fear tells you better not, and you don't, you regret it later. We all know that. We see a pretty girl when we're young, we want to go say hi to her. We don't have the courage, and then she leaves, and it's like, oh,
maybe
you
we
win.
still do that. Maybe we still do that, right? You say, oh,
Well, I don't do that. I've been married. I'm with my
yeah.
beautiful wife for
Me,
30
I'm a
years.
single guy, but I'm just like I stay in my lane.
You're out there in the single world, ladies.
Yeah, well, single and not ready to mingle. So,
and tell you what.
what? I got to tell you, one of my favorite sayings is the universe falls in love with a stubborn heart. I love that saying. You know what? I would tell any young person, any of your young viewers, anybody, failure hurts, but remorse of shoulda, coulda, woulda, man, that's a million times worse.
Way worse.
Oh, yeah, that'll follow you around like a specter,
Well, Michael, we've reached that time where it's time to, it's flown by.
And now the end is near.
So, right. So for people that would be interested in taking your class, how they get a hold of you?
You can find Film Acting Michael Jacques on Instagram. You can Google search me, Film Acting with Michael Jacques. My book, as you said, Rod, thank you so much for the promotion. It's available on Amazon. Yeah, basically, I don't advertise. My classes are word of mouth, which is the way I want it. If you're looking for a good coach, you'll find me. That's just what it is.
Yeah,
So,
and I know that some of your fellow students have made their way out to LA and are working out here doing well.
One of my students in particular, should I name his name or no?
Again, I don't tell you what to do, brother.
Well, one of my students named Lucas, who I just love. He's just the kindest young man. And I've known him since I knew Lucas Rod since he was like 13, 12, I don't remember. And now he's grown, man. He's got healthy relationships, but he is unbelievably successful. Here's a quick story for your listeners, your viewers. He called me up, I think it was about a year or two ago, called me up backstage from the Hollywood Bowl. And he called me up and he said he was walking through the hallways and looking at all these platinum records and photos. And he said to me, none of this would have happened had I not met you. And I was so honored and humbled, and just what a beautiful thought to help somebody else like that, which actually, Rod, gets right back to the very first thing we were talking about. The kismet of paying it forward, being of service to other people. I really think that's important. I do. As corny as it is, it's the truth.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, if you're not
kindness. Yeah.
If you're not helping somebody else, what the hell good are you?
Yeah. Well, there's extreme power in kindness. And I'll close on this. When I talk to my clients and people about kindness, their first thought is that's an act that you do towards someone else. And I'm saying, no, kindness has to start with you being kind to yourself. Don't beat yourself up. Don't blame. Don't shame. Don't put yourself down. Don't criticize. Don't judge. Just accept yourself in the moment where you are on your journey, and do it with a loving kindness that you take care of your spiritual self so that you're watering it and it can grow. And so absolutely start with yourself and be kind, and then use that energy to be kind to others and spread it. And it's really powerful.
100%, Rod. I could not agree with you more. 100%.
All right, Michael. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure. Great to see you again. And Thanks for coming on the show.
Rod, you are the man. Love you.
The
dearly.
the podcast. Like, this is a show.
Oh, before we go, you have to do the salute for me.
Oh yeah, the IYB.
This is an IYV. I buy these on Amazon.
And I bought this IYB because of you.
That's a collectible now. They stopped making those. They got sued by Gibson, so you can't get those anymore.
Cool. Well, I feel bad then that I'm sorry, Gibson.
Well,
but for the price of whatever, $200, it's a nice guitar, man.
Listen, man, they're great guitars. Rod, if I may say before we bail out, thank you for having me on your show.
Sure.
Thank you for allowing me to speak to your audience. And I hope that your guys dug it as much as I did. So thank you so much.
Right. It was a pleasure. All right. Take care. Michael Jacques, everyone.